Once upon a time,
in a land far away.
I'm Katrina.
And I'm Geoff.
This is the Fairy Tellers Podcast.
Myth, legend, folklore, fable.
We explore what they say about cultures then and now,
Grab a hot cup of cocoa and a comfy seat
while we tell you a tale.
Welcome back to the podcast for another exciting episode.
Yes, and this one will be fun and silly because we're going to be talking about some of our favorite characters and our favorite themes.
Death, the devil,
and Norwegian folktales.
Greatest hits.
I guess I will say this. It's not going to be just Norwegian, but it's going to be the kind of like Northern European tales.
Nice. Love it.
It's gonna be a little mix, and we'll explain why it's gonna be a little mix.
Yes, super exciting to be talking about these Scandinavian and Nordic countries' tales because I, for the very first time, abused my power as a podcast host to get some free stuff from a company. And that company is a company called Free League that makes role-playing games, like tabletop role-playing games, which is something that I'm into these days. And they make a game called Vaesen, which is a really cool game where you're basically kind of these, I want to say paranormal, but that makes it sound like more modern, where you're like investigators of folklore monsters of the Mythic North, which is basically Scandinavian and, Nordic countries in like the 19th century Europe, like a modified version, a fictional version of that time where these, creatures are 100% absolutely real and you're a type of, investigators that can see them, which not all people can. So yeah, I like contacted the company and was saying like, hey, I do a podcast about folklore and fairy tales. We like talking about this stuff. You want to send me some free stuff so that I can use it as material for talking about on the podcast? And to my surprise, they absolutely did. So super excited, but it's not like it doesn't tie into the stuff that we're talking about, but it's really cool because like you go into, well, there's a few things that are cool about it, many things that even be interesting to you if you are not interested in role-playing games or anything like that. Number one being that this role-playing game is actually based on a book, which is kind of an art book.
Yes.
Called Vaesen by Johan Egerkrans, who wrote this book and drew a bunch of art. And it's basically like a bestiary of sorts, or just a collection of all these different Vaesen, which are, different kinds of monsters, will have little informational things about all of them, and sometimes including even kind of like short folk tales that feature these monsters. And it has like amazing art.
It does. It is gorgeous.
And the company, Free League, saw this and they're like, hey, we could turn this into a game. And so based on this other book, and it uses a lot of art from this book just about the Vaesen in the game book that they created. And then there's also more art that was created for the book, and made this like really gorgeous role-playing game book as well that has all this amazing art in it, has sections where it talks also about the Vaesen and the different kinds of Vaesen, and including, stats and things, so you can actually like fight them or do whatever. But it's like really, really interesting. And the book itself too, it's a role-playing game book, goes in and talks about even just like type of stuff that we would talk about on the podcast. Like, okay, this takes place in the 19th century, Mythic North. And these are the types of things that in actual history were going on in this area. And kind of one of the big themes is something that we've talked about a lot. Well, two of the big things are with industrialization, it's changing kind of the way that people are interacting with the natural world. More people are moving into cities. Cities are expanding out into previously like more natural environments. And so there's this conflict then that with the Vaesen as that those things are happening. And then also, interestingly, like Christianity plays a huge role in the role-playing game, which was something that was like kind of surprising where, this kind of conflict between Christianity and these like folk beliefs, but then also how like something that you'll see in lots of these stories and stuff too, like Christianity and Christian symbols are sometimes the things that you can use to overcome like the power of the Vaesen. So it's like kind of this interesting like religious aspect of it too. So it's just like really, really fascinating. So you can learn a lot about history, a lot about folklore, a lot about the types of stuff that we talk about in this podcast. It was super cool to get into this book and study that stuff and learn about it, and also then get to play a role-playing game, which is something that I love to do.
And of course, I'm into it because I'm like, wait, a role-playing game where also I get to learn more about folklore and fairy tale of like an area and like, I don't know, feel immersed in the storytelling part of it or like the story creation part of it. not even just
Yeah.
like the storytelling, but like the like creation of a tale. That's one thing that I find really fascinating about role-playing games. I am not by any means like a role-playing aficionado. Jeff has been with me every single time I've done anything close to a role-playing game.
You just talking just now kind of reminded me of like you've talked about, I can't remember what the term is. What's the term where you go out?
Ostension?
I think it's ostension. I was like, I know that there's like a specific word that's just like very specific for this. Not like a phrase that describes it, but just a word. Ostension. That's it. I think that's it.
Yeah, it's ostension is like you going out to kind of like reenact like the thing to make you then part of, to like feel the story on your body.
Right. And I feel like, role-playing games in this sense where it is very, like, very, very related to folklore, it's kind of like ostension in your brain.
Yes. Yes.
Like you're doing the same thing without like actually going and like actually participating in the thing, but like in your imagination, more so than just reading about it would be.
But the thing that you are participating in, I also am finding extremely fascinating, which is this idea of people who do these like role-playing games. They are storytelling while story creating.
Yeah. You're like the audience and creator at the same time.
And they're doing it like as a group where it's this like improv of like yes and you've kind of all agreed to a certain set of rules where like what the dice say happens. Like you might do something, but the outcome of that is a little bit on luck and chance and like the roll of like a dice. And you, because you've agreed to the rules of this like storytelling game, you have to go with whatever happens next and be okay and comfortable with it. Or maybe not comfortable, but accepting of like what happens, even if it is like your character's demise. Like you can't just be like, I'm taking my ball and going home. Be like, no, I don't want to play with you. That's not what happened. I'm leaving. And so there's something really fascinating to me as like a storyteller about this idea of as a society, we don't have as many spaces where we are sitting and telling each other made up stories anymore. Like in the same way as like somebody might be like sitting around telling the stories like that we're about to retell, like for the podcast. It's like from a book of folktales that somebody collected like at some point. We don't sit around and tell stories like that. We do a lot of personal narrative or even like family narrative, maybe like community legend telling a little bit, but not a whole lot. And so this idea that like Dungeons and Dragons, these role-playing games have created a new context in which people are creating stories, sitting around in a circle, creating a story together that's never been told before, never been heard before. And it might have like contain elements that are legendary, but it's kind of, it's a mix and match of like what they use.
Yeah. And that's the other thing that's really fascinating. And why I bet you that there are, the Venn diagram of people that are interested in folklore and that are listening to our podcast and people that play role-playing games. Like I bet you there's a pretty significant center section of that Venn diagram that people are like probably listening and already know all about Vaesen, or people that are listening that, play Dungeons and Dragons, which is definitely the most well-known, most popular role-playing game, in the United States of America at the very least.
Yeah.
And even then, like so much of like from the beginning with Dungeons and Dragons, there was so much of that is tied into folklore directly and indirectly. Indirectly through the fact that it's kind of based on like Tolkien, like fantasy tropes like created by him, like dwarves and elves and stuff like that, which were very heavily influenced by like Icelandic and Scandinavian Nordic folklore to like, Tolkien. But then also you go through like the monster manual of the original Dungeons and Dragons, and there's all sorts of these creatures. Like there's like Jinn and there's the creatures from folklore from different cultures all over the world. Yeah. That appear in there. And like, they've taken and put their own spin on it and whatever, but it has those elements tied into it, which is, super fun and interesting.
And especially when the idea of folklore being dynamic, meaning like it can change, and the people who are like playing around with it are the ones who get to like change it. But then you do kind of come to this, not a full consensus of like what is like, there's not canonized dogma, like you can do whatever with it. And so as some of those monsters and stuff change from like, these Jinn don't behave exactly the same way as the Jinn in the 1001 Nights, or even like jinn inside of like the Muslim religious like worldview, they don't act the same as those. And it's like, yeah, because people have taken like this concept and dynamically changed it, because when the folk get a hold of something, they can make it into something else. And that's what, like with Dungeons and Dragons too, the people have done with a lot of like folkloric characters that already existed in like folklores and mythologies. And I think they're like, you know what? In my story, this thing can only be killed. Or like when we play the game, the only way that this thing can be killed is like this rule, this rule, this rule. People are like, well, but like I read that you could use this tool. And it's like, that's from a different game. Or that creature's not the same as the creature in this story. It's like just very interesting that like people are taking things and making them their own. They're pulling it back to the folk. And yeah, so even though I have not played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, it's like, or a lot of like role-playing games, the more that I know about them and the way that stories are created through them, the more fascinated I am as a storyteller by like that idea of sitting around together in co-creation, and the idea of reviving the art form of sitting around with friends and telling stories, going into that like play imaginative world in your mind.
Absolutely. This is kind of like a side tangent related to that, but another fascinating thing to me about like role-playing games, when you are creating these stories and everything, when you go back, and there's been like academic work talking about this too. I don't remember like study or just someone's like article or whatever, but when you go back and you're like talking about the game that you played and you're telling the story, like you're not, and I know this just from my personal experience too, when you are telling that story again, like after the fact, like, oh, like the last session that you did, or like, oh, remember that one time we did this, like you talk about it from the position of the story, not we were sitting around playing a game.
Yeah.
It was like, no, I was there and I was shooting arrows like into the darkness as this like monster's chasing us down. Like I was doing this thing. Like we, in our memories, like put ourselves into the actual scenario, which is just another like, you know, fascinating element, which is why I kind of, again, was relating it to ostension, where it's like in your memory, you are there.
Yeah.
More so than even just like at the table while you're playing pretend.
And that is like just like a super fascinating element. So super, super fascinated by this game.
Yeah. So
since I'm kind of on this kick, and it's definitely fairy tale folklore related, Geoff and I are still trying to figure out what our best way to use the material that we got for the podcast. But one thing that I did get, not for free, from the publishers of the role-playing game, but that I got for myself. So this book, the Vaesen book that's by Johan
Egerkrans,
I bought for myself. Geoff and I accidentally bought each other for Christmas.
Okay, this is where I'm going to change your memory and point out, I bought it for you for Christmas.
You're right.
You bought it for yourself.
This was a self-serving memory where I wanted to be better.
It just happened to work out that I also got to keep a copy because I wanted a copy that I had not bought. But so it worked out.
Yes.
But
you are twice good.
Yes. I just want to embed this self-serving memory in your head.
Except that it's the true memory.
Or is it?
We'll never know. We will. But anyway, so I'm like, I did pay money for this book, and it is gorgeous. The artwork in it is absolutely gorgeous. Obviously, I got a translated copy into English because I wanted to be able to read it, which is excellent. And so I've been enjoying flipping through it, looking at the different creatures that are featured and reading about each of them and how they tick. And also, I've been looking at Norwegian folktales that were collected around the same time as like Brothers Grimm were collecting tales and publishing books, because that's where this artist got a lot of their information, was by looking at like older books of like bestiaries from the area. So I thought that we would start off this episode by talking about one of my favorite characters. especially when it comes to Christianity and Christian creep. It is just really interesting when these stories are butting up against Christianity and what is kind of taught about in the religion itself, about the way that theologically the universe works. But then also you have people's like folk belief and then like old stories that exist about these characters that are like on the landscape. And so you get a mix and a mingling inside of the stories about what can actually defeat the devil, who can trick the devil, or like can Christ overpower the devil. And it's always kind of like a crazy mix. And it's really super fascinating. So of course I love looking at Lucifer. So luckily in this book, the devil pops up. And I love that in this book, the author also includes like as many names for each of the characters that might like describe them, where it's like you get this like the Swedish name, what you might be familiar with like in English, and then also other names that similar entities might have, so that it's like if you have heard this name, this name, this name, this name, they're all water spirits who all kind of serve the same generalish purpose. But again, like what we were saying earlier, from story to story, there's like different features. And so it's like there's not just like one all-encompassing definition for even, like werewolves or, kelpies, any sea creature, things like that. And so in this, there's Satan, Lucifer, the Prince of Darkness, Old Nick, the Tempter, Fan, Scam, the Evil One, the Wicked One, the Old One, Pocker, Horn Eric, Horn Pier, Black Pete, Old Eric, etc. And there's a lot of names for the devil because it was believed for a long time that because in superstitions, in a lot of fairy lore, and even in mythology, if you know the true name of something, then you have power and dominion like over it. But also when it comes to the devil, if you speak his name out loud, then he would appear. Which there's an old saying that is exactly that.
Yeah. Speak of the devil.
Yeah. Speak of the devil. Or I was going to say, speak of the devil. And the last part of it is, and he will appear.
Yeah.
Because that's when somebody shows up after you said their name and you're like,
for sure.
Speak of the devil. And they will appear.
Yeah. Because they're showing up because they are the devil, because you said their name and you summoned them.
Yes. So the reason why there's so many names for Satan is because people don't want to say.
Yeah.
I don't know which one's supposed to be his true name. I think it's It's supposed to be Lucifer.
Don't. Yeah.
And the podcast there.
But like, I think that I can't remember if I said it before we were recording. If I said it like while we were recording, but it's like Old Scratch. That's one that I always like from.
Yeah.
I don't remember where I ever heard that. It's not something that I heard like an actual person actually refer to the devil as, but from like a story sometimes.
Yeah. Because I'm like, I also feel like the only time I've heard him called like Old Scratch was in like a really old story or something that was supposed to be like framed as like a really old story. And so inside of this book, there is a very interesting little story because like the author, he tries to like include little snippets in italics of like stories that he has found in the research from like other books that kind of like back it up. And it is in italics. And I love it too, because in the terms of like the book and the book style, it makes it seem like kind of this like, oh, and here are like, it almost feels like evidence of like it being true, because it's like, oh, here's where this is like found. I mean, he doesn't frame it as like,
yeah, this really happened,
but kind of like it has that feel as a book and a bestiary of this like, oh, and here's this tale.
Yeah, it like strikes a really nice balance between being like, it's not an academic book, and it's not trying to be an academic book, but it's also not like, I feel like we have stuff like this in the United States, but and maybe I'm just not aware, but like I feel like it tends to be like a children's book about these things, and so it's like very like simple, somewhat like sanitized to be like child friendly. I don't know, but like it strikes a really good balance of being like very informational, but also very like entertaining and somewhat accessible to non-academic people, because it's an art book, but it has so much more information than you would expect from an art book.
Yeah.
You know.
So one of the things that he includes in here is a little snippet of a story, and it actually it is like a really short story, but it's the Harga dance. And it actually was a little hard for me to Google search or look up more stuff on it, because I guess in the movie Midsummer,
is that part of it?
They call it the Harga dance, but they're dancing around a maypole, and what it's based off of, they are not dancing around like a maypole, but the idea of dancing till you're exhausted, I guess, comes up in the movie.
Interesting.
Which is kind of based on this. But the legend of the Harga dance, obviously, guys, my Swedish is lacking. So
your ancestors would be ashamed.
I know. I am ashamed. But the Harga dance, or the folk song, was also called the Harga Mountain. And it first pops up as a folk song from the 1700s, which I love. I love that the story started out, this little story snippet started out as a song first. And so I absolutely encourage people to look up the song on YouTube. You can even find school children in Sweden performing the song. And I'm like, that was super cute, because there was one video that I saw where one kid is pretending to be on a fiddle, and the other kids are dancing till the end of the end of the song, and then they collapse, and it's cute, right. But also in a very they're singing about a really dark song, or it's a really dark story, but also at the same time it's this almost 300-year-old folk song that they're still performing and that they still know, and I feel like that's really beautiful. Anyway, I'm going to read you the English translation exactly for the song. It's not what's found in the book, because it's not the song in the book. It's it's written like a story. But the song, the translation goes, "The fiddler pulled his fiddle out of its case and raised his bow to the rising Sunday sun. Then the people of Harga got excited. They forgot God and the whole world. The dance took place in the meadows and slopes high up on the peak of the Harga mountain, and wore out both shoes and heels, never getting the dance to stop. Where do you come from, fiddler? Tell us who has taught you this wild and crazy melody. If you don't stop now, our hearts will burst. Oh, God forbid. He has a hoof." The bells rang in the valley, and there went father and mother and brother to the parish church. Where can the youth of Harga be now? Oh my God, they're still dancing. They were dancing to the Harga song high up on the Harga mountain peak. Tears aren't far off while dancing. They wore through both soul and body. Stop your bow, fiddler, before we dance life and soul and all the bones out of our bodies. No, he won't stop the dance before everyone falls down dead. And then all the children collapse in the school gymnasium.
It's like what they'd say about Ring Around the Rosie. Which,
yeah.
It's that's not actually true though, right? That they're it's a bubonic plague song, but I don't.
Yeah, I can't remember, but I do think that it is a song about death.
Yeah,
even if it wasn't during the bubonic plague.
Yeah, maybe what it is it's a song. I don't remember, but there's something the story goes that you hear is it's about the bubonic plague. It's a ring around the rosy, a ring that's around the rose, the red sore is the sign of the bubonic plague.
Yeah. And then they're and people would carry posies in their pockets because they thought that it could get rid of germs or whatever.
Kept the smell away or whatever.
Yeah, get the smell of death
and
away.
Ashes because they burned the bodies, and then we all fall down because we're all dead because the bubonic plague killed half of the population of the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think maybe the thing is that the song is kind of about that, but it wasn't a song that comes from all the way back then or something. I don't know. Someone fact check us and write us in because
for sure.
I couldn't be bothered.
For sure. But yeah, so the narrative version of this story is that it was late at night under a full moon, probably.
Of course.
But it was a Saturday night, and these young these not children, but young adults who had forgotten, God, and that like, oh, you guys should be in bed so that on Sunday morning you're ready, like when the bells are ringing, to like go to like church. But no, they went out late Saturday night and they're dancing like up on the mountain. And suddenly the dance is interrupted by this fiddler who shows up, and he's wearing this like big dark hat on his head, but all you can see like on his face are his like burning eyes. And he pulls out a violin and he starts to fiddle on it, and everybody starts dancing, and he's an amazing like fiddler. And so the people are dancing, having a good time, but then some people, you know, are like, oh, I'm getting tired, I want to stop. But then they discover that they can't stop, and they like keep going and going. And as dawn is coming and church is starting and people down in like the village are going to church, they're nowhere to be seen. They can't stop dancing. And the devil starts to like lead them off up into the mountains, and they're forced to like follow him out up into the mountains. And when people found them later, it was basically like they had worn down a ring from like dancing in the grass, and there were their bones laying down. They had basically danced. And in some of those stories, it's like all that was left was their skulls, because basically, and the skulls were still dancing because it was basically like their feet had like their heels had worn down, their feet had worn down, their shin bones had worn down. Like basically it was like they were dancing so much that they were like eroding from contact with the ground until they were like nothing. And yeah, and it was like at some point while they were like dancing, somebody looked and noticed that like this fiddler had hooved feet, and they were like, oh no, we've been captured by the devil. Spooky story. Absolutely love it. And so of course I was like, you know what? Let's do some more tales that have to do with the devil and death.
Yeah.
And so I grabbed my copy of Norwegian Folktales selections from the collection of Peter Christian Ashjornsen and Jorgen Moe. I hope I'm pronouncing those names close to correct. Probably not, but we do our best. And so the copy that I have, obviously translated into English, this book is put out by Pantheon Fairy Tale and Folklore Library. Love their fairy tale and folklore library over at Pantheon. They have a really wide selection of different folk tale and fairy tale collections that you can get. And I do have a lot of them. And the story that I'm going to retell, it is a quick one. It's pretty short. It's called The Devil and the Bailiff. So there was once a bailiff who everybody said was a fleecer of the worst sort. So constantly cheating people out of their money. People who were down and out at their most desperate, he was like, oh, don't mind if I make you a little bit more desperate and down and out. He was an absolute jerk. And one day, the devil showed up to fetch him. And the devil said, hey, I'm here to pick you up. I'm here to get you. The bailiff was like, wait, what? Why? What's going on? He's like, well, I'm constantly hearing people like talking about you. And it is always in the context of, devil, take that bailiff. Devil, take that bailiff. Devil, come and take this man. And it's just nonstop. They keep asking me to do it. And so I just got to do it because like I'm sick of all this. Because I've been watching you like for a while. And you know what? Indeed, you are so bad. I don't believe that you could be any wickeder or worse if you tried. So,
oh man,
let's just call it. Let's just call it for what it is, and like, let's go.
And when the devil says that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, when he's like,
that's bad.
Yeah, he's like, dang, bro, I'm getting worn out from like having to deal with you. And the bailiff was like, what? If you'll pay attention to everything that folk chatter about, like you're gonna be pretty busy, way busier than you could like possibly imagine. People are constantly just saying like, oh, devil take this, devil take that. Like they're always saying it. So I don't think you should take me just because like people are constantly calling for you to take stuff. And you shouldn't listen to what everybody tells you to do. I don't. And so the bailiff spoke up well for himself, was trying to be as convincing as possible about like why he was right and the devil and everybody else in town were wrong. So the devil, after talking to this guy, I don't know, maybe recognizing a kindred spirit, something like that, he was like, you know what? I'm feeling a little good-natured now that we're chatting. So they agreed at last to join company for a while. And the first person they met who bade the devil take someone, that is who the devil would take. And he would set the bailiff free. But the devil stipulated it has to come from the heart. The person has to actually like really mean it, not just like flippantly saying it. And the bailiff was like, yeah, of course. Sure, no problem there. So as they were walking along, they came to a cottage and there was an old woman who was out and she was churning butter. And when she saw the strangers coming, she wanted to take a little peek at them. And so she walked away from churning her butter just for a second. And in the meantime, her little pet pig, who had been just like rooting around, snuffling around, obviously for something to eat, get into, trouble to cause, as little critters do, stuck its snout into the churn and then just started gobbling up all of the cream, as little pet pigs and all naughty little creatures that live in our house are wont to do. And the lady, when she was like hearing, like, what's that sound? It was, oh my gosh, it's a little pig gobbling up cream. She goes back in the room and she was like, was there ever a worse plague than a pig like this? The devil take you.
Did she mean it?
And the bailiff was like, oh, she said it. She said, devil take that pig. You've got to take that pig. And the devil was like, do you think that she's truly offering me this pork? Like, do you really think that she's like offering me like up a ham hock? No, she wants to keep that pig because what else is she going to eat for her winter supper? She does not mean that literally or seriously. It did not come from the heart. She's upset at the pig, but she doesn't actually want the devil to take her pig. She still is going to use that.
Devil using the bailiff's own argument against him.
Yeah. Like, oh, you said people didn't really mean it. And so I'm taking you.
Did you not really mean it when you said people didn't really mean it?
No.
Because it's sounding like you're saying you didn't really mean it when you said that, but you seem like you meant it.
Yeah. Feels a lot like you meant it. So they kept walking along together and they came to another cottage. And in front of this little cottage, there was a little child who was up to some mischief, as little children are, and sometimes bigger children are wont to do. The mother, came out of the house, saw her kid. What's funny is like they don't in the story say what the thing the kid was doing that was like mischievous. It's left to our own imagination what this kid was doing.
Probably sticking his face into the butter churn and gobbling up all that cream.
Yeah. I'm like, I can imagine like drawing on the side of the barn with little muddy hands. I don't know.
Oh man, carving his name into the side of your 2012 Toyota Sienna minivan with a stick.
Did that ever happen to you?
Yeah, it did.
So, I was thinking about my son who hammered 3 nails into the top of my table.
Ugh.
And somebody at some point said to me, oh, you could probably, they're not so deep. You might be able to sand it down and refinish the table. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, that's, if the nail went in to any amount to be stuck in it, that's too deep to sand down. You could put wood filler or something in it, but it's not going to look great.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'm not that fancy of a person where I'm going to care. If somebody is looking that close at my table and they're saying that there's other defects on my table than just... But so who knows what this kid was up to. I'm like, I know it's like any parent who's walked away from their child literally for 30 seconds. You come back in the room and you're just hoping that they didn't smear ketchup all over your walls. So anyway, they don't say what this little kid was doing, but it does say he was getting up to some mischief. And so the mother, she walks out of the house, catches her kid doing something mischievous and was like, oh my gosh, I have had enough of you. I do nothing else but wash and wipe and tidy up after these nasty children. Girl, relatable. Devil take you, she said.
But did she mean it?
And the bailiff was like, oh, she said it. You've got to grab that kid. You got to take that kid with you. And
remind me why the bailiff is so excited to send people to hell.
Oh, because he's trying to trade with the devil.
Right.
Or
if he doesn't,
then it's him.
Then he's going.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I love this. I love this in this story, not because I literally think the devil said this, but because I believe that the people, when they were retelling this folk tale, like when they were saying this story, they knew it to be true and included it in this story. And I love that because the devil says, oh, that doesn't come from the heart when a mother curses her child. And I'm like, Satan, thank you. He gets me. Like, not that I'm like cursing at my children, but it's the same that like when parents are like complaining to each other about their kid, like we were just doing just now, like kikiing about like the like so often, especially women have to always start when they're complaining about their kids by saying, I love my kids. I love being a mom. My kid is usually so good. But let me tell you the thing they just did. But they always have to start it with, I love my kid.
Yeah.
But yesterday they lit a fire. It came in my backyard. Like they, hammered nails into my table. They carved their name into my car. Like, and they have to preface it before they start complaining with like, I love my kid. And that always bums me out, just when somebody has to be like, I love my kid. Because it's like we know. Obviously, like the devil once said, it doesn't come from the heart when the mother curses her child. It's just like we get it. Like you're at your absolute like wit's end. And in the moment, you might say something that like you regret to your pet pig or your child. Like that's just a thing that might happen. So the devil was like standing up for this woman and a mother's right to be upset, but not hateful, like towards her children. And I appreciate him for that. So they kept walking a little bit further, and then they met two farmers. And one turned to the other and said, hey, look, there's that bailiff of ours. And then the other one turns around and looks and goes, devil, take that farmer fleecer alive. And the devil was like, ooh, now that came from the heart. Well, come with me.
Amazing.
And that time, neither praying nor pleading helped. And you guys don't get to enjoy the illustration that is included in the book, but I want you to know that the devil has got this guy by the ankles and is running off with him down to hell, and the devil's full butt cheeks are out. And also the bailiff's toupee is flown off of his head, which beautiful. And we love that for him. So now moving away from the devil, not just a little bit, just a touch. Geoff is going to tell another story that's found in this Norwegian Folktales book. So this story is called The Boy with the Beer Keg.
So there once was a boy, and he had served a man who lived way up north in the mountains, or north of the mountains. And the man that this boy worked for was a master at brewing beer. And like, it was so good. It was the best beer that anyone could find anywhere. And so one day when it came time for the boy to leave, it's like, having read the story, I'm picturing it's like he wasn't up there for like a day.
Yeah.
He would go for like a long period of time, which actually is really interesting because something I learned from one of the adventures from Vaesen in one of the like supplementary books is like this whole thing of like farming where there'd be people who they have, what is it? It's like they have like fields that were closer to town.
Uh-huh.
And like during the winter, they would keep their animals there. But then like during the growing season, they would take the animals like off into the mountains.
Mm.
They would grow stuff on the farms and then like bring them animals back. So it's like they would go off and like live for like the entire season off like at these far places like in the mountains. Kind of reminds me of that. So it's like this kid goes up there for, weeks, months at a time to brew this beer and then like comes back.
Yeah.
And when the boy was leaving, the man was supposed to pay him the wages that he earned. And the boy apparently would accept nothing as his wages except a keg of Christmas beer.
Which, listen, that sounds like such a young adult move. I'm not going to lie. For him to be like, no.
Yeah.
Don't pay me money, because possibly in my imagination, he's like, I'm just going to be like staying at family's house like when I leave here. So like I'm not worried about paying my rent or I'm not worried about anything else. The only thing I'm concerning myself with in this moment is, can I get wasted with my friends?
Yeah. He's like, let's skip the middleman. I'm going to buy beer with this money.
Yeah.
Why don't you just give me the beer? Especially because it's the best around. He's not going to get better beer than this anywhere else. So that's exactly what this boy got. And so he set off with it and carried it both far and long. But the longer he carried it, this huge keg, the heavier and heavier it got. So he started looking around and he's like, okay, I got to lighten the load a little bit. Like, is there anybody that can come and like drink this beer with me so there can be less beer and my keg can be lighter? It's like, it's a win-win. I get drunk and the weight is diminished.
Yeah.
And also he gets to share that, revelry with some other fortunate soul.
Yeah. I will say that the like research that I'm doing on like Christmas beer, I just want to say the Norwegian Christmas beer that I was just looking at sounds super intriguing. It is apparently dark, rich, and malty with notes of caramel, spice, and dried fruit. So it is like a very specific treat that he probably was like, you know what, now that I'm going home, presumably for a holiday, he wanted to take this like seasonal alcohol like with him where he's like, this is going to be really good. And I don't know, there's something about like those flavors specifically that to me sound a little medicinal. I'm just going to leave that there.
Interesting you would say that. So yeah, he's looking for someone to share this Christmas beer with. This borderline medicinal tasting Christmas beer. And so after a while, after he had this thought, he sees an old man with a great big beard. And the man's like, hey, how's it going? And the boy's like, great. How about you? And the man's like, oh, yeah, where are you going? And he's like, actually, this is great that you struck up this conversation because I'm trying to find someone I can drink with so I can make this keg lighter. And the man was like, well, you know what? You can't drink with anybody better than me. Let's do it. I've traveled really far. I'm tired. I'm thirsty. Let's get drinking. And so the boy's like, yeah, of course. Where are you? What kind of man are you? And the man said, I am Providence, and I come from above, I do.
Mm-hmm.
And the boy is like, what? Taken aback. He's like, I won't drink with you. For you make such a distinction between folk here in the world and dole out justice so unequally that some rich and some unreasonably poor. No, I won't drink with you. And he trudged off again with his keg.
Nice.
Which is like hilarious. He's like refusing. And so he goes a little bit farther. And the keg again becomes heavy. The righteous indignation and anger that he felt that fueled him with adrenaline to carry it further starts to wear off, and he gets not sleepy, but tired again, and again looking for someone to share the beer with. So he sees another man walking towards him, and this is an ugly, skinny man who came rushing up to him at a fast clip, it says. And so the man says, good day. And the boy's like, yeah, good day to you too. And the man starts talking to him. He's like, so where are you going? And the boy once again is like, hey, perfect timing. I'm looking for someone to, drink this beer with to lighten my load. And then this skinny, ugly man is like, well, you can't drink with anybody better than me. I'm super tired. I've traveled a long way. A drop of beer would do me really good. Actually, he says, a drop of beer would do good in an old carcass, which is hilarious. And the boy's like, yeah, let's do it. But first, what kind of fellow are you? Where do you come from? And this guy's like, me? Well, I'm pretty well known. I'm a guy that you might call the devil, and I come from below.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah. And the boy's like, what? No, the devil? I can't drink with you. You only plague and torment folk. Wherever there's any misery afoot, it's all your fault. I'm not going to drink with a guy like you. So, not wanting to share his beer with the devil, he picks up his keg and starts carrying it again. And then, of course, it starts getting heavy and he can't carry it anymore. So he starts looking around again to see if there's anyone else that could drink with him. And after a while, another man comes along. I'm sorry. There's not very many women in this story. Yeah. There's not any women in this story.
Wow.
Why doesn't he want to share a drink with a nice young lady?
No Bechdel test passed today.
Or an old lady.
Yeah.
Anyway, so another old man comes along, and it says that this old man was so dried up and skinny that it was an out-and-out miracle that he hung together at all. And so the man, seeing the boy, is like, hey, how you doing? And the boy's like, I'm doing pretty good. And the man again is like, hey, where are you off to? He's like, well, you know what? I'm here trying to see if I can find somebody to drink my beer with me to make my keg a little lighter. And so the guy's like, hey, you know what? You couldn't find a better fella to drink with than me. And he's like, okay, well, yeah, maybe not. Haven't had such luck so far, yeah. And so he's like, well, yeah, sure. What kind of man are you? And the man says, oh, well, they call me Death. And the boy's like, oh, yeah, I can drink with you. And he puts down the keg and starts tapping beer into a mug. You're a worthy man, for you make everyone alike, both rich and poor. He's got a good point.
He does.
So he drank with him. And Death thought that it was glorious. gloriously delicious beer. And, the boy liked Death pretty well. And so they, took turns drinking. Death, the
dude. Yeah.
The dude, not Death, wasn't trying to drink himself to death.
Yeah.
Although that could be an interesting metaphor for he couldn't find anyone else to drink with to this point. So he's drinking alone, so much so that he gives himself alcohol poisoning and meets death that way. But that's not what happened. Yeah, no. So they take turns drinking, and the beer went down and the keg grew lighter. Finally, this boy accomplished his goal. And Death was like, man, I've never known a drink that tasted better than that, or did me quite as good as that beer did. I think I've been made a new man. And you know what I'm going to do? I know just the thing I can do to thank you for it. And so after pondering for a bit, Death said that the keg would never become empty, no matter how much he drank from it.
Which I'm like, that feels like it defeats the purpose of what he was trying to do, which was like lighten up the keg.
Yeah, that's like the exact opposite of what the kid wanted, which is even more hilarious. It's like, you know what I'm going to do to reward you for sharing this delicious beer with me? Because you wanted to lighten the load. I'm going to fill it all the way back up. And you know what else? On top of that, and this actually is a benefit, I'm going to turn it into a magic medicine. Because it tastes like medicine, because it's Christmas beer with all those spices in it.
Spices, yeah.
And so with this magic beer medicine, you can make any sick person well, better than any doctor ever could.
Just a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine.
But Death also said that whenever, the boy came into someone who was sick with the beer, Death would be there and would appear to him. And if Death was standing near the foot of the bed of this person that was sick, then that meant that the boy could give them this medicinal beer and they would be healed. But if Death appeared and he was sitting near the head of the bed, then nothing that the boy could do, giving him the beer, giving the medicine, any type of advice, would prevent Death from taking that person. Kind of like this sign that they came up with, who could be helped and who couldn't.
Yeah, which I don't know, it begs the question of when is Death showing up to kill somebody, but he's like, I could go either way on that one.
Right.
I could go either way with this. But then other times he's showing up and he's like, nah, this one's got to go. This one's got to go.
Yeah. It's like, what is determining?
Yeah. He's like, sorry, kid. Today I got to meet my quotas.
Yeah.
So I got to take this one.
It does seem kind of like, well, here's the thing. It seems a little bit like, this is the only thing I think, but it doesn't make any sense still. But the closest thing is that there are some people that have, they get a sickness that they are going to die from. And so those are the people that the medicine will heal. And Death's just showing up to say, hey, they're really sick, but they're savable.
Yeah.
Whereas, if they were sick with a sickness that was going to kill him, it's going to kill him and the medicine won't work anyway. Where it falls apart is, why is Death showing up at all except to tell him where people can be saved and where not,
Yeah.
I think a better system for that would have been, if you show up and I'm not there, then it means that their sickness can be healed, which is also okay, maybe if Death's not there, it means they weren't going to die, or maybe it hadn't gotten so bad yet that they were going to die.
Yeah.
And so he could heal them. And then, even if they weren't going to die anyway, he can heal them and they get better faster rather than having a prolonged illness, whatever. But that's not what they did. They came up with this system of the Death's going to show up no matter what. And it's it makes it seem like that the interpretation is this person was going to die, but your medicine will save them.
Yeah.
But why some people, why not? Death's not here for us to ask that question to. And I really want to know.
And I mean, I guess also sometimes Death, it feels arbitrary to us.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, where it's
that's a good point.
You get a room full of people who all have the same sickness, and then some of the people get over it and then some don't. Sometimes old people don't die, but young people do, or and so it feels sometimes like Death is really arbitrary.
Right. What a wise, insightful comment. Yeah. At some point.
Even though we all will die. We all will die at some point. It is equal in that regard of that there's no way out alive. But it is arbitrary in the fact that it feels arbitrary to us because
yeah, that's a really good point. I bet you that that totally is the point of that being that way. It's hey, who knows? Some people are going to die, some people aren't going to die. That's just kind of the nature of death.
Yeah.
And even with this magical beer, you can't overcome that. Anyway, so this boy takes his super full, heavy keg of magic beer. What didn't make it magical so that it felt light as a feather as he carried it. That would have been
a nice touch too. It's it's not as heavy.
Brought a little mule to carry his keg of beer back for him. But anyway, the boy, after that point, because he had this magical beer, started gaining some degree of like renown about town, some fame and notoriety for the fact that he was able to cure people. And like a lot of people that like doctors and other people were saying like, oh, there's no help for this person. Like there's nothing that we can do. But this boy would come with his magic beer and he would see Death sitting there at either the foot or the head of the bed. And he'd see him at the foot of the bed. He's like, oh, hey, like, I can save him. And he would give him the magical medicinal beer and they would get better. And so through this, he became like very rich and very powerful and, very well known. And so one day he was summoned by the king to see the king's daughter because she had gotten really sick.
Bum, bum, bum.
And so obviously the king heard about this guy. He was like, hey, I want my daughter to live. So, and he had brought doctors in and doctors were like, there's nothing we can do. We can't save her. She's so sick. She's going to die. And so he's going to his last ditch effort of bringing this boy with this magical medicinal beer in. And so he's like, hey, like I will give you anything that you wish for if you can only cure my daughter, because no one else said that they could do it. And so when the boy came into the room where the king's daughter was laying, Death was sitting there. And guess where he was? At the foot of the bed? No. Of course not. No. He was sitting at the head of the bed, meaning he would not be able to save this girl. But Death, being an old, shriveled, decrepit
carcass of a man,
that miracle he was hanging together, like many an old man does while sitting in a chair, was nodding off and sleeping. And while this was happening, they noticed like while Death was, not they, but the kid noticed, because he could see Death, while Death was nodding off, the girl started to like feel a little better. But then when Death like would kind of like come to and wake up, she would start feeling worse again. And so again, the doctors are there like there's nothing that can save this girl. But the boy waits until he sees that Death is dozing off again. He gets the idea, hey, while Death is sleeping, I know what we can do. So he tells the servants like, hey, take her bed and turn it around so that the foot of the bed is over here and the head of the bed is over here, so that now the chair where Death is sitting is at the foot of the bed. And while the bed is like that, he gives the girl the beer and she is healed.
Which I'm imagining like the people, he's like supposed to be this like renowned doctor. And he's like, okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to just like redecorate.
The feng shui is not feng shui.
Yeah.
You need to get the energy flowing correctly in this room for my magical beer to work.
So I'm going to need you to flip this girl around really quick and quietly so we don't wake up Death.
Yeah, and instead he told them to turn the bed around in a hurry. And as soon as they did, he like, he's like, we got to get this done before Death wakes up. And when Death did wake up and saw what had happened, he was like, you cheated me. We're done. And the boy was like, I had to do this. I had to do it because I had to win land and kingdom, he said. He was going to, gain this great prize from the king. And so Death's like, you know what? That's not going to help you very much. Your time is up. Now you're mine. And the boy was like, okay, well, if that's the case, then I guess I better say the Lord's Prayer. At least let me say the Lord's Prayer first. And so Death was like, okay, yeah. That's fine. Go ahead and say your prayers, kid. Then you're dead. But then the kid's like, perfect. You agree to that? Great. I'm never going to say the Lord's Prayer. And so he, went about his life doing everything he could, but never saying the Lord's Prayer, never letting those words, our Father, cross his lips. And so he thought that he had cheated Death once and for all. Because it's like, is this like an immortality glitch?
Yeah.
Where like now he can live forever. But Death had a lot of time to think. And so when he thought long enough, he's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take a board that has the Lord's Prayer on it. And I'm going to hang it up in the boy's room. And when he wakes up, he's going to read this thing and start saying it without even realizing it, because he'll still be so sleepy. And that is exactly what happened. He put this sign in there. The boy kind of woke up and started saying the Lord's Prayer. And he didn't realize what he was doing until he said, Amen. But by then, it was too late. The end.
I'm like, in a Christian theology kind of a way, that's actually still really nice, because like he still was able to like, the last thing that he did in his life was say a prayer to God. And so he was like, cleaned himself up before.
That was a good, that was a wise move to be like, look, I can either live forever, or if I do die, I'll get myself right with God as soon as I do, because as soon as I say it, I'm going to die, and I'm not going to have a chance to sin after I've said the Lord's Prayer. So,
in case people are wondering about the story of the boy with the beer keg, there are other variants of it. It is in the AT index as type 332. I have not found anything to say if that is still its ATU number, because some things got like rearranged when Uther was like adding stuff. And so the source that I'm looking at is just saying that the AT number is 332. And it is called Godfather Death, because in the Grimm's fairy tale collection, it is called Godfather Death. And it's slightly different in that the story starts off with like, there's a poor man who has like 12 children and that he's like working really hard to feed. And then he has this 13th child. 13. Something's up with that. And he goes to try to find like a godfather for his child because he's run out of people. He has so many kids that he's like run out of people who can like be a godfather to his kid and like, you know, help about it, like his situation. And so as he's walking, he runs into God first in a shocking twist, turns God down to be the godfather.
It's literally in the name, dude.
Yeah. And the guy's like, no, God, like you condone poverty and like you give like some people riches and similar to like the province one, but without it being like actual God, which I'm like, dude, that's pretty blasphemous. And then it's the devil being like, oh, I'll give your kid gold and like riches. And the guy's like, no, like, I don't like your morals either. But then he meets Death walking on like the highway, and Death, he's like, oh yeah, you take away the rich and the poor. Like, you don't care. I will let you be the godfather to my son. And then when his son gets older, Death gives that kid, like shows him in the woods where he can find these like special herbs that grow that can be a medicine to stop. And he gives him kind of like a very similar setup of like, if I'm at the head of the bed, you can give them, or you can, the person's going to die. But if I'm at the foot, you can give him this medicine. So it basically sets the kid up, because Death is his godfather. It sets the kid up to have a job, which is like what godfathers are supposed to like help you do. They're supposed to like give you connections to give you like kind of like the best possible life moving forward. And so it's like, you want to pick friends that like, oh, this guy's a blacksmith, so maybe at some point he's going to take my kid, his godson, as an apprentice as a blacksmith. So it's kind of like that kind of a setup. And so Death in that way is able to be a good godfather by setting this kid up with a job. But then in the story, this kid, not just once, but like twice, tricks Death into like healing somebody. And it's on that second one that he's like, nope, absolutely not. Hey kid, like I told you the first time you pulled that trick, like, I'm your godfather. I love you, man, but like, you can't be doing me like that. Don't ever do that again. And then the kid like did it again for a girl, which listen, hey, what can you do? Find a different girl that you don't have to. Yeah. But anyway,
find some non-dying girl.
Yeah. Because I'm like, yeah, I guess he,
that hard.
Yeah. I'm like, I guess he like saved her life. But at the same time, yeah, it's like death has to come for us all. And sometimes you don't get to choose. So
yeah, but he doesn't have to come for us all right now.
It was that kid's own personal trolley problem.
Yeah. But he had it was a self-serving life-saving.
Yeah. Because in this story, he was going to save the life of a princess so that he then could be married to a princess and inherit the kingdom. So it's like, yeah, it was very much he wanted to save this girl, not because he was like, oh no, this girl, she had her whole life in front of her, but because he was like, oh, I could be better than just a doctor. I could be part of the royal family. So yeah. Anyway, so there are several different like variants like around the world like of that tale. Very interesting, including a variant in Japan from the late 19th century. It's been pretty like established that the one in Japan was based off of the Brothers Grimm. Anyway, so that's just a side. All of that on like the Brothers Grimm version is a side note for people just so that they know. Because yeah, I'm like, since we're retelling this story, I should probably tell people that like there's also a Brothers Grimm version, just so they know about that. But getting back to the Norwegian tales, one thing that I did find really interesting while I was reading, obviously, you know, the introduction to the Norwegian folktales collection from Pantheon, as I'm always doing, I love reading the introduction about the collection and the stories. And this one, it goes into a lot about the folktales and the illustrators, which was like really cool. Because there have been a lot of really amazing Norwegian and Swedish illustrators for their folktales, like especially, that are incredible and gorgeous. But one thing that caught my eye in the introduction that doesn't have to do with the illustrators was it talking about rural life in Norway. It was saying rural life in Norway has always been centered in the family farms, small isolated communities, often surrounded by great forests and high mountains. In the old days, the church was the sole authority in life and faith, but everyday problems were solved by belief that was never questioned. The folk tales reflect the tremendous imagination of the people as well as their independence and self-reliance. A Norse historian once complained that the tales always belittle the king. He referred to the fact that the king was often depicted as a fat, genial farmer who could be approached as an equal. There is biting satire in the tales, and the humor is often broad and earthy. The representatives of the church are treated rather irreverently. Nevertheless, standards of guilt and justice prevail, and moral law is present, even in the world of the trolls. But I particularly found that one sentence of the representatives of the church are treated rather irreverently super interesting, just because when we were playing one shot together the last time that we were hanging out as a group of friends, which was only, I think, like the second time I'd ever done a role-playing game. Geoff's wife, her character is this like kind of like occult priestess where she is a little eccentric, a little nuts. And when we got to this bar that we were like investigating this like supernatural happenstance or whatever, there was a priest who was like drinking at the bar, and Geoff's wife was like wanting to nonstop do mischief to this man, do like ridiculous like stuff to him, and like tie his shoes together like under the table, like, and just like any chance she had, even if she wasn't like interacting with him, she was like throwing slights at him, just like casually being like this guy, and trying to convince my husband, who was like also playing, to have his character do stuff to the guy. Like it was just so funny that she like nonstop was like just menacing this man, just like absolutely after him. And it was delightful. He ended up being very useful and helpful to us at the end, which I also think is funny because when she was remembering, as we were talking about earlier, when she was like remembering doing that like in the game, and she was like, oh yeah, that guy. And I was like, that guy did nothing to anybody. Like like
she's like disdainfully.
This guy. I was like, I want to remind you that like he was the one that helped us to handle the like supernatural like element that like happened. Like he was essential to that. And she was like, whatever. And I just thought it was like just so funny, but very in character, like for her person who is like this literal like hag in a crag, like fringe witch, you know, in the woods. And so then I thought it was super funny when I was reading about how like the fairy tales folklore in the area, the local religious leaders, there was this kind of general disdain for them. And it seems to kind of stem from them usually being outsiders or people who were not pulling their weight in the community. And so some of the tales just are a little bit like, and this guy. So I have a really short tale that kind of like illustrates a little bit of that. So this is the parson and the sexton. So a parson is an ordained Christian leader who's usually responsible for like a small area.
And a sexton, isn't a sexton that's like they're responsible kind of more for like
the land,
physical.
Yeah. They're less versed in like theology and more versed in fixing doors and pews and cleaning graveyards and digging graves. Groundskeepers, the sextons are. So there was once a parson who was such a blusterer that whenever he saw anyone come driving towards him on the highway, he would roar from afar, off the road, here comes the parson himself. So,
yikes.
Very, very self-important guy.
Very parsimonious.
Ooh.
I don't think those have the same root, but you know what? Parsimonious doesn't actually even mean that.
Oh, okay.
Parsimonious, extremely unwilling to spend money or use resources. Doesn't describe this man at all.
Fine, then I will delete you saying that.
Yeah, please don't make me look like an idiot on the internet again.
So yeah, everybody in town absolutely sick of him. Which again, I love that these like stories. They have like the religious leaders just being just absolute like jerks. And it is
Yeah.
because they was like kind of seen as like the only thing this guy does all day, like he like lives off of basically like the good graces of everybody in like the town, but then treats everybody like they're beneath him because he thinks that he's so important because he's like a man of God. So there's just like, yeah, that kind of like disconnect between the parson and or like the religious leaders and like the village. Anyway, so once when the parson was, riding around in his cart on the highway and carrying on just like he normally did, he happened to meet the carriage of the king. So before the king had gotten close with his carriage, the parson from a long way off, just right up front, started like screaming, off the road, here comes the parson himself. And it says like the king kept driving straight ahead. He wasn't going to like lower himself to screaming at some man on like the road.
Right.
And so he just kept going straight ahead. And finally, the parson did have to turn his horse to the side because I'm like, why are you playing chicken? And so when the king came alongside him, he like looked up, in his cart and him off like the road. The king said, tomorrow you shall come to the court. And if you can't answer my 3 questions that I ask you, you're going to lose both frock and collar for the sake of your prideful behavior. So yeah, he was about to get demoted hard. And then what was he going to do? What life skills did he have? He couldn't farm.
Probably couldn't even fix a door.
Yeah, probably couldn't even fix a door. So that was apparently quite a tune different than the parson was used to being talked to and addressed to his face because people were talking about him behind his back. So it was like bluster and bellow as he could and, say what he could. He couldn't do that in front of the king. And also said, as good as he was about carrying on and doing worse than that in his behaviors, doing a question and answer wasn't quite in his skill set. So he went to the sexton, who he said had a better head on his shoulders. Which I'm like, well, that's good of him to like admit that he's like, But I think what he meant more of was like, he has a better head on his shoulders to stretch your neck out for me.
Right.
So he said, hey, so I need to go tomorrow to the king. And you know what? I'm not really feeling like going. He said, for one fool can ask more than 10 wise men can answer questions. So he's like, this king, he's an idiot. And, idiots, they'll ask a million questions. And even me, as wise as I am, there would have to be like 10 of me to handle the dumb questions that this guy is going to ask. Which, Geoff, sometimes it do be like that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it does feel like some people are so incredibly stupid that I'm like, no one can help you. Anyway, so he wanted to send the sexton to the king at his place. So the sexton went. And he got to the royal manor and he was dressed up in the parson's frock and rough collar because obviously they were trying to do a little switcheroo on the king. And, the king couldn't really remember what one townsperson looked like versus another one, I guess. But he's like, you're in a parson's frock and rough collar, like obviously same dude. And so the king came out and met him, it said, wearing both crown and scepter and looking so grand he fairly shone. And so the king saw him and he was like, well, there you are. I have a question for you. My first question is, how far is it from east to west? And the sexton was like, it's about a day's journey. And the king was like, how you figure? And the sexton was like, well, the sun rises in the east and then it sets in the west. And it does it pretty nicely all in a day. So about a day's journey, I would say. Which I'm like, nice, because it's like, obviously the king had set up these like questions to basically be like,
right,
you can't answer these and I'm going to demote you. First, I'm going to give you a dressing down and then like demote you. So then the king said, all right, tell me now, what do you think I'm worth? Just as you see me here. Priceless. And so the sexton looked at him a little bit and he said, let's see. Christ was valued at 30 pieces of silver. So I'd better not set you any higher than 29.
Oh.
Which I'm like, You know what? Excellent use of Bible also for like your justification. So obviously he'd been, somewhat, paying attention at church, but also I'm like, that's a very diplomatic answer where it's like, ooh, you can't argue with that when he's like, well, Christ was worth 30 pieces of silver, which if people are unfamiliar with the story, 30 pieces of silver is what Judas sold Jesus out for, is why there's that price.
Right. Yeah, it's like, wait, what?
Put on Christ. In case people are unfamiliar. So then the king was like, since you're so wise on all counts, tell me what I'm thinking right now. And the sexton looked at him for a little bit and he said, I suppose you're thinking that it's the parson who's standing here before you, but I'm sorry to say you're wrong, for it's the sexton, which is smart. You're thinking that I'm the parson because that's what I told you. Or that's what I made you assume by wearing these clothes. But you're wrong. I'm the sexton. And the king went, oh, that's good. Then go home with you and you be the parson and let him be the sexton. And so it was. So then that stuck-up parson had to be out doing the sexton work, which I'm sure was really low quality. Because I'm imagining that guy trying to like upkeep the pews and stuff with absolutely no skills. But you know what? Love it. Love that it was like, oh, you know what? Let's let this other guy have a chance. So I loved that, like that irreverence in the folktales towards the, local religious leaders. And I also enjoyed when we were playing the game, that she also wanted to sneak that in there. So that story was dedicated to her and her antics while we're playing this game. So hopefully people enjoyed this episode, because I anticipate that we'll probably have some other tales as we are, while Geoff and I are playing the game, going through it, learning more about these like different folklore creatures, and just like enjoying that as, I don't know, a bright spot of fun in our lives. My life, I'll speak for me.
And mine too. You can speak for me.
As we're doing that, I'm sure that there is going to be other kind of like tales that come out of our like research while we're doing it. Things about, brook horses and troll hags and other fun stuff.
Thank you for listening to The Fairy Tellers. If you enjoy what we're doing, please leave us a review or share us with your friends. For access to exclusive bonus content, consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/thefairytellers. Special thanks to Andy Forey for our music and to Clarice Inch for our artwork. And of course, a big thank you to all our patrons. Without all of you, this show wouldn't be possible.
Good stories pay little attention to cultural or linguistic frontiers. The student of story collections find themselves adrift on an ocean of stories, an ocean which is boundless, deep, and ceaseless in motion. Robert Irwin.
I'm not going to drink with the kinds like you. I'm not going to drink with a guy like you. Just leave all of that stumbling in. Because then you'll edit it out. If I told you to edit it out, then you leave it in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Reverse psychology. I just did that by saying
reverse.
It was reverse psychology, and then I reversed it again. And now you're so turned around, you don't know which way the reverse is coming from.
Yeah.
And so you're like not going to do anything, which means leave it in, which is...
I'm going to take out your stumbling, but then I'm going to keep in the part where you were saying, like, keep in my stumbling. And people were like, what is she even talking about? And you're like, this is reverse psychology. And they're like, what? He didn't even stumble on anything.
Going to take gaslighting to a new level by gaslighting our audience too.
Yeah, boy. Implanting memories.